Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, or welcome back. Today we're talking One Piece again. This time we're going to be discussing the writing for Koby and Helmeppo, looking at their anime, manga portrayals, and how the live-action alterations affected their characterizations and their arcs, taking into account both Season 1 and their brief appearance in Season 2. So take heed, here there be spoilers. To be clear, although we will be heavily comparing and contrasting the anime, manga, and live action, the goal going into this is not just to measure the live action content according to how well it adapts the source material, but also to see how well it stands on its own. As before, I've invited fellow One Piece fan Zexand to help with this video since he's more familiar with the manga. Now let's dive in. Koby and Helmeppo's roles in the anime are initially confined to just the first few episodes. Then they disappear until episode 68, where we get to see why and how their characters have grown. Then they are not seen again until episode 314, where they briefly reunite with Luffy and show their continued progress. In live action, the creators chose to combine the separate pieces of their arc into a B-plot over the whole first season. On the plus side, this helps improve the interconnectivity of the East Blue Saga. It also necessitates including Garp, who makes for a formidable and intriguing overarching antagonist for Luffy. But unfortunately, it all strains the very limited runtime, dedicating effectively an entire episode worth to a side plot without much to show for it in the end, which you'll see as we go through this.
And for those that know where the story goes much further down the line, it negatively affects not only the power scaling, but even some of the decisions made by other characters like Garp. Also, hi y'all, I'm back.
Hello, boys! I'm back!
Looking at Koby's original arc, when we first meet him in the anime, he is, as Luffy puts it, a wimp. He has a good heart, but he is timid and weak with no self-confidence. By accident, Koby fell under the thumb of Captain Alvida, a violent pirate who threatens her crew into submission, Koby especially. The boy fears for his life, and so he's basically been a slave on her ship for 2 years. He has a dream to join the Navy to combat pirates like Alvida, but that ambition seems unreachable. However, upon witnessing Luffy's commitment to his own goal, Koby is inspired to take the leap himself. When Alvida tries to intimidate him again, he stands up to her. He is terrified of the consequences, but he accepts them as the cost of being true to himself, of pursuing his dream. An article I read put it quite eloquently when it said, Alvida is really more of an opponent for Koby than Luffy himself. Alvida is truly defeated when Koby finally stands up to her, and Luffy knocking her out is just a reward for Koby's bravery. It's important to note here that while Luffy certainly keeps Koby out of harm's way, he does not take Koby's battle away from him. Koby must stand up for himself. After Alvida's defeat, Koby escapes with Luffy and helps him reach Shellstown, where Koby discovers that there are members within the Marines who are no better than Alvida. And just as with her, Koby holds to his newfound conviction and helps undermine their power as well. Just as a quick aside, I've gotta point out here, in the manga, Koby actually gets shot while trying to release Zoro. And even though Zoro encourages him to run then, Koby refuses. He believes that working together, Luffy and Zoro can escape the corrupt authority there, and he's determined to help them. When Morgan and Helmeppo are defeated, Koby is reassured to discover that the Marines of Shellstown were not all corrupted like he had thought. He sees himself reflected in them as they express the same relief and joy that he experienced after being freed from Alvida's tyranny. And so he recognizes that they had only been complying with Morgan out of fear. With that understanding, he knows that joining this Marine branch will enable him to fulfill his dream of stopping bad guys, rather than simply changing which bad guys he's working for. But Koby has one more obstacle to face before he can become a Marine: his attachment to Luffy. Koby considers Luffy a friend. He admires him, he feels indebted to him. But becoming a Marine means he must disavow Luffy. And once again, simply by being himself, Luffy helps bring Koby's own strength of will to the surface. Setting aside the many issues with J.K. Rowling, what Dumbledore says in the Philosopher's Stone applies perfectly here.
It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to your enemies, but a great deal more to stand up to your friends.
And so the once timid boy finds the courage to join the Navy, confidently asserting his goal in the face of skepticism and suspicion.
私は反対ですよ。私はまだこの子を信用しきれません。
僕は海軍将校になる男です。
Thus, Koby has taken the first step to achieve his goal. When we're reintroduced to his character over 60 episodes later, we see that although he effectively remains powerless, having only been accepted as a Marine chore boy, his growth from that first arc stays with him. He does not let his low station diminish his spirit, nor does he let Helmeppo drag him down or push him around. And he maintains his courage, valiantly standing up for what he believes in spite of the potential consequences. Although it could cost him his dream of staying in the Navy, not to mention the risk to his life, Koby puts it all on the line to rescue Helmeppo when he's taken hostage by his abusive father. In the manga, Koby only blocks the cannon from turning Helmeppo into collateral damage, while Helmeppo stands up to his father on his own. But in the anime, Koby goes a step further and actually swims out to aid Helmeppo against his father. Either way, Koby's sacrifice for Helmeppo not only creates a bond between the two boys, but also draws the attention of Vice Admiral Garp, who decides to take them both under his wing and help them reach their potential. As for Helmeppo's arc, when we first meet him, he is one of the antagonists. As the son of a tyrannical Navy captain, Helmeppo is untouchable, and he knows it. He uses the fear of his father to get away with doing whatever he wants, whether it's bossing around Marines or terrorizing citizens, and he enjoys the power trip. Yet the truth is that he means as little to his father as anyone else. Axe-Hand Morgan only loves himself and his authority, but Helmeppo cannot help but love his father. He tries to defend Morgan from Luffy and later mourns at the thought of his execution. It's not until Morgan threatens his life and Koby risks everything to save him that Helmeppo finally understands who is worthy of his admiration and loyalty, and he breaks free from his father's domineering.
Just popping in to add that I think Helmeppo, when we first meet him at least, may be less of someone on a power trip and more someone adapted to having a father whose psyche was twisted by pirates. Although it's a rabbit hole we don't have time to go down, I suspect he may be suffering from a form of malignant narcissism. I think the trauma of losing his privilege, being disowned by the father he idolized, and seeing Koby's bravery and loyalty all kind of help break Helmeppo away from that and start to heal on a better path. Later on in the manga and / anime, you still see he has narcissistic attributes, but they're much more toned down by his personal growth.
After facing Morgan together, Helmeppo and Koby are like brothers, bickering and looking out for each other in equal measure. When Helmeppo feels overwhelmed and considers quitting, Koby grounds him. When Koby finds himself stuck in a rut, it's Helmeppo who pulls him out of it, by deciding, for his own admittedly selfish reason, to join Koby in pursuing becoming a Navy officer. And when Garp challenges them both to test their resolve, Helmeppo backs up Koby wholeheartedly. Just as Luffy inspired Koby with his conviction, Koby inspires Helmeppo. In turn, Helmeppo holds Koby accountable and helps him push through to new heights. As the saying goes, iron sharpens iron, and thus they continue, such that by the time they reunite with Luffy, they are almost unrecognizable. In a good way.
Koby and Helmeppo's story between Shellstown until they reunite with Luffy is told through different methods in each version of One Piece. In the manga, their story is revealed one page at a time over 30 installments, each one being the cover page of a different manga chapter. Then the anime took those pages and, with a little creative liberty, wove them into a 2-episode mini filler arc that's set between Whiskey Peak and Little Garden. It's a nice little breather between the two arcs, and then they also took that story and broke it up into 2 separate stages. First at Shellstown, and then second, the training at Marine HQ. Then, as Emmy mentioned before, the live-action series took that content, plus some more creative liberties, and then spread it thin throughout their first season. Spread thin like a bit of butter over too much bread.
That's right, folks. Now it's time to look at how the live action adapts their arcs. When we first meet Koby, we see the same timid boy with a good heart stuck among Alvida's crew. Though disappointingly, rather than subtly showing how Koby is oppressed aboard her ship, perhaps through an implied threat or bruises on his arm, instead the dialogue simply tells us he's in a miserable predicament.
Alvida doesn't let me eat until after she finishes her meal. She tells me when to eat, when to sleep, I even have to paint her toenails. She'll never let me go.
I'll try to make this quick, but I want to offer a bit of wisdom on balancing show versus tell. As writers, we're often told to show and not tell. While generally that's good advice, I've warned that it can't be taken too far for a lot of reasons. One major constraint when you're dealing with the runtime of a movie or a show is the amount of time you can take to go into detail. There are also the constraints regarding your target audience, where what you can show in animation versus live action is quite different. And depending on the subject matter, some things are better left told and left to the imagination rather than explicitly shown. For instance, trying to show all of Koby's abuse to a new general audience would be rather unpalatable, especially since this is the first episode and could immediately turn new viewers away. So one must be careful when deciding how much to show and where to lean into tell. These are other things that can be discussed, but I don't have time for a full essay within a video essay.
Then, when it comes time for Koby to defeat Alvida,
Answer me, you sniveling runt.
He doesn't have to.
Koby's his own man.
No, he's not. He's mine. And he'll always be mine.
That's not what he told me.
He said that you were mean and cruel.
And that you're as dumb as a sea cow.
No, Captain Alvida, I didn't.
Luffy takes Koby's moment of agency away from him, and Koby desperately tries to undercut Luffy's stand against Alvida. And yet later Luffy frames the confrontation as Koby's victory. Visually, the scene ends the same, with Luffy knocking Alvida flying. However, she's only been defeated on a surface level. It's lacking the deeper symbolism of the original. Now, I don't know for sure, but it's possible that was intentional on the part of the live-action creators, since we do see later that Koby is still under her influence. And from a realism standpoint, this is a choice that I can understand, even appreciate. But portraying growth realistically, which is to say slowly and with setbacks, is difficult to execute well, especially with a side character under a time crunch.
I'm quickly jumping in to reinforce Emmy's point. Most stories, by their very nature, have to have more streamlined character growth. People will often feel like their time is wasted, or even their emotional investment wasted, if a character continually aggresses all or even most of their character growth. A realistic growth story needs to have a lot of things going for it to work well, including very particular and specific forethought. It needs the right characters, the right type of story, with the growth being a major or the only focus. And it needs to be told to the right audience in the right way. I think there's a reason it can work in a story like 3 Days of Happiness or Freerin, but falls flat here and, to be honest, in more stories than I can recount.
After the boys reach Shellstown, we meet Helmeppo, who is, of course, cocky and egotistical and, horror of horrors, rude to a little girl.
What's everybody looking at?
Stupid girl. Why don't you watch where you're going?
Oh, so sorry.
Next time I won't be so nice.
The horror!
Now, of course, being rude to kids is not okay. They deserve the same respect as anyone else. But in the grand scheme of things, this is very tame for antagonistic behavior. Yet the narrative tries to make a mountain out of a molehill in how Koby later reacts to it, and in how it is narratively punished, which we'll get back to. As for the confrontation with Zoro, we'll delve further into it in our next video discussing Zoro's character, but for here I just want to point out that in the anime, the Marines present refrained from protecting Helmeppo, which implies that they appreciated Zoro and later Luffy teaching him a lesson. Whereas several of the Marines present in live action hurry to aid Helmeppo against Zoro, implying that his reputation among them is decently favorable, which is an oddly out-of-sync detail with the way the narrative otherwise frames Helmeppo. So I suspect it's due to the live-action creators not considering why these Marines would fight for Helmeppo, and instead just focusing on making a cool fight scene. And to be fair, it is a cool fight scene. But anyway, witnessing Helmeppo's behavior toward Rika leaves live-action Koby mired in confusion, questioning his dream and his identity. Even Luffy's reassurances do nothing to improve his mindset. Realizing this, Luffy chooses to infantilize him, giving him a distraction and labeling it as help.
I need to get into the base and find that map, and I could use some help.
How about you help me get the boat ready?
Koby half-heartedly agrees, and then he twiddles his thumbs off screen for the next 20 minutes. Now, before we get any further, we need to address Koby's motivations. In the anime, when Koby reveals his goal of becoming a Marine, he specifies that his desire is to catch villainous pirates. He mentions he's had that dream ever since he was little, and especially after having been Alvida's victim for 2 years, it's no wonder he's so passionate about bringing people like her to justice. Live-action Koby likewise has had the goal of becoming a Marine ever since he was a kid, but his specific desire is to protect people. It's a minor wording change, but I believe it is a major contributor to the problems with his character journey over the course of the first season, because protecting others is not inherently tied to being a Marine, which is demonstrated by Luffy protecting people even as a pirate, while we see Marines, directly and indirectly, harming people. As a result, from the start, Koby's determination to protect people as a Marine is on shaky ground. Once again, I'm not certain how intended it is, but we do see that reflected in Koby's wishy-washy behavior throughout the season, which one could call consistency or part of a good character arc. However, part of the issue is that the disconnect between protecting people and being a Marine is never meaningfully addressed or resolved, which you'll see as we continue. So, after Helmeppo's resounding loss against Zoro, they both go to see Axe-Hand Morgan. When Morgan suggests that Zoro should pay the penalty for assaulting Marines, Zoro threatens to end Helmeppo. Understandably, Helmeppo complains about this, and Morgan responds by hitting him, to show both of them how little he cares about his son. The abuse is shocking in how sudden and casual it is, but narratively, it amounts to little more than a passing mention. We don't even get the decency of a reaction shot from the main character present, and in less than 10 seconds, the scene has moved on. Helmeppo is basically forgotten. Aside from a brief reaction to Morgan complimenting Zoro, he's not even visible for the rest of the scene. Contrast this to the anime. Luffy had, understandably, punched Helmeppo, and so Helmeppo hurries back to Morgan, expecting him to drop what he's doing and rush to avenge him. But Morgan doesn't, and Helmeppo demands to know why. Morgan sees his entitlement as disrespect, and he strikes Helmeppo to drive home the lesson that he is beneath Morgan, not the other way around. And the anime narrative does not shrug this moment off. It sits with Helmeppo, cowering in terror as his father berates him further. And as the scene continues, with him maintaining a role in it, we get to see that while Helmeppo was cruel, Morgan is insane.
殺したんだろうな。
いや、だってあれまだほんの元気だし。
町へ行って始末してこい。できません。
何もそこまで。
This scene shifts the presentation of Helmeppo. Suddenly, he doesn't seem so bad. To be clear, the narrative does not use this to excuse or justify his behavior. It doesn't even make us feel sorry for him. More than likely for first-time viewers, the emotional reaction to this will be satisfaction at seeing Helmeppo finally get put in his place. But this moment does influence our perception of Helmeppo's character moving forward, by showing us that he is subject to the same oppression as everyone else under Morgan, and that, unlike Morgan, he still has some of his humanity. But getting back to the live action, the morning after Zoro is strung up, Helmeppo comes to taunt him. When Zoro again responds with threats, Helmeppo ends up revealing that Morgan will never set Zoro free. Lucky for Zoro, though, Luffy releases him, enabling him to go hunt down Helmeppo in his room, posing naked in front of his mirror with Zoro's sword. This is so unnecessary and honestly inappropriate. I cannot understand why the creators would do this. I assume we're supposed to laugh at Helmeppo's vanity, the sword being an obvious symbol, but I find nothing funny about him being caught completely vulnerable by a man who has repeatedly threatened him. To be clear, what bothers me is not that they showed a man's butt. What bothers me is the lack of thought behind this scene. If a woman was put naked on set just to be the butt of a joke which makes light of assault, I hope people would have a problem with that. And I wish people would also have a problem with a man being treated like that.
Okay, I have a conspiracy theory about this. Around the same time as the first season was being filmed, Netflix was getting a lot of very positive buzz about the male nudity in Bridgerton. I can't prove it, but my belief is that Netflix may have given the producers a nudge to include something similar in One Piece for more of that buzz. It's also part of a pattern that I've noticed, whereas the female nudity has decreased, we've seen more male nudity increasing, which I think either could be trying to bring parity to the nudity overall, or it could just be to increase the amount of women interested in a piece of media. But unless you're making specific media for specific audience, it should really all fall under the umbrella of do better. Fan service, ecchi, or erotica all operate under different rules. but what we're discussing and focusing on here is writing for a mass media audience.
After being caught in his birthday suit and threatened by Zoro again, Helmeppo joins Koby off-screen for 10 minutes, reappearing once the Straw Hats have concluded their fight with Morgan and are trying to escape Shellstown. He holds the crew at gunpoint, demanding they surrender. In the anime, he held Koby hostage in an attempt to save his father, despite how Morgan had abused him. And it's clear from how Helmeppo shakes and hesitates that he does not want to pull the trigger, he's just scared and bluffing. As a quick aside, I want to point out how showing this complexity of a neglected and spoiled child desperately trying to help their abuser adds nuance to such a character, and that nuance creates space for sympathy moving forward. Meanwhile, Koby, on the dangerous end of the gun, stands resolute. Again, Koby defeats the antagonist by undermining them. Luffy just finishes them off. In contrast, the live action makes Helmeppo's attempt to stop Luffy mainly about himself becoming the hero. It can be inferred that part of his motivation is to impress his father, again suggesting some nuance. But it's quite overshadowed by the fact that by this point, it's clear to everyone, except apparently Helmeppo, that he is completely outmatched by the Straw Hats. So really, for the whole scene, he's just the butt of a joke. Luffy and Zoro simply mock him, and then Koby rematerializes and punches him out cold. Keep in mind that the worst this Helmeppo did was act rude to a child and taunt a main character. But he is narratively punished by being abused, assaulted, and humiliated. To me, it feels disproportionate, as if he's paying for his more exaggerated villainy from the original. Yet where the original allowed for sympathy in spite of those crimes, the live action treats Helmeppo like a punching bag for far less. That being said, Koby punching Helmeppo is clearly meant to be a substitute for when he punched Luffy in the original. It's supposed to be this big moment where he finally takes action. He even comments on how satisfying it felt to hit Helmeppo, but it's completely hollow. Helmeppo is effectively powerless, and the two of them have had zero interaction before now. There's nothing thematically fulfilling about blindsiding a stranger for no reason. Koby is not protecting anyone here. He's witnessed both Luffy and Zoro's strength. He should know they're not in any danger from Helmeppo. Plus, he already saw Helmeppo receive his just desserts for how he treated Rika, so he's not dealing out justice here either. So yeah, it feels like more narrative punishment for Helmeppo rather than narrative progression for Koby. But to wrap up this episode, when Luffy expects Koby to join them, Koby hurriedly explains,
Before we met, every choice was made for me. Now I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna be a Marine. I want to help people that can't help themselves.
And that's it. They say goodbye and go their separate ways. To be fair, this rushed farewell does maintain a sensible feeling of urgency. After all, the Straw Hats are supposed to be fleeing from the Marines. But unfortunately, it hampers the emotional tone of the moment. Originally, because taking down Morgan had been appreciated by the locals, the Straw Hats were not in a hurry to leave, which meant that their farewell could be paced more appropriately to the emotional tone. As I said earlier, having Koby struggle to break the mental chains Alvida had on him is a valid choice from a realism standpoint, but that change undermines this moment. Now, Koby making this decision for himself is not much of a payoff, because we've lost all the setup. He failed to defeat Alvida, and then he immediately became disillusioned with his dream, and so he sidelined himself while the Straw Hats defeated Alvida's Marine parallel, Morgan. However, he apparently resolved his identity crisis off-screen, leaving us with zero insight into what inspired his newfound determination. Between Koby's big moments feeling unearned and what should be his emotional parting with Luffy being crammed into a single minute, this not only fails to recreate the impact of the original, but also falls flat on its own merits. And that's just the first episode. In episode 2, when we next see Koby, he's already a ranked cadet. In the anime, we were shown him requesting to join the Marines, but the live action omits this event, which is not inherently a problem. But in this case, it leaves us with a lot of questions. You see, later it's made clear that Koby kept his time with Alvida and his escape with Luffy a secret, which is true to the original. However, we also learned that Morgan knows Koby interfered when Helmeppo tried to arrest Luffy. And Bogard reveals Koby was recognized as being with Luffy in the tavern, and Helmeppo knows Koby is friends with Luffy. So with all that knowledge kicking around, how did Koby manage to get accepted? What was the story he gave to explain what happened at the dock? Did Helmeppo not try to prevent him from being accepted? Did Morgan let Koby join in exchange for keeping quiet about what really happened? All these questions are sidestepped by the narrative skipping his admittance scene and hoping you don't think too deeply about it.
Chiming in quickly myself, Koby and Helmeppo are full cadets here compared to being chore boys in the original story, which are kind of a pre-cadet rank, or in ROTC, for the Americans out there. Koby and Helmeppo being forced to do chores together is what gives them the time and proximity to start connecting. It also creates opportunity for the narrative to reveal some important things that make Helmeppo grow from a one-dimensional gag to a two-dimensional character, with a full 3 dimensions coming soon. I admit that the live-action cutting straight to full cadets makes sense due to the time constraints. Cutting out the prior stage does mean that the two boys needed other ways to spend time together in order to set the stage for their character arcs. But that's something we'll touch on later.
It's also worth pointing out that Koby has regressed. His newfound determination to make his own decisions is crippled as soon as he joins the Marines. He's terrified of his dream being taken away, so he keeps his head down, while Helmeppo, still a bad Marine at this point, maintains his authority under Morgan's leadership. And Morgan also proves himself to be a bad Marine by lying just to make himself look good. To be transparent, this scene is the only time that Morgan and Koby are on screen together. So while we've been shown enough to know that Koby has reason to oppose Morgan, we have not seen that he has any ability to act. He has no witness or evidence to report. Just like with Alvida, the narrative does not give Koby a way to contribute against what he believes is wrong. Instead, Garp ousts the egomaniac through his own intuition and investigation, which understandably all happens off-screen. Oh, and Helmeppo's emotional turmoil over his father's downfall is also left off-screen, replaced with a mere reaction shot.
Following on from both points, I want to point out that Koby should view Garp taking out Morgan as yet another black mark on the Marines. At least in the original story, once the Shellstown Marines were finally able to apprehend Morgan after Luffy had defeated him, the base's second-in-command took over, arrested Morgan for his abuses, and sent for Marine HQ to take custody of him. Here, they just go on with business as usual. So Koby simply ducking his head and wanting to protect his dream at this one little base makes even less sense. He should have either moved on to join in another base, or, at the very least, contributed to Garp's suspicions against Morgan. As for Helmeppo, what they skipped was the first time he was ever fully humanized and sympathetic, to me at least. I always say that a good story is like a good argument. You need the right balance of logos, pathos, and ethos. And they just hamstrung the pathos in the B-plot. Cutting it out was a colossal mistake.
What we get on screen is Koby immediately caving to some light intimidation, spilling his secrets and dreams to Garp, and identifying Luffy as the pirate who infiltrated the base before hesitantly disavowing him.
Do you owe him any allegiance?
He's a pirate. Pirates should face justice.
Now, considering the broader context of what we see later in the season, it's clear that Koby doesn't actually feel that Luffy ought to face justice. So why does he answer this way? Well, remember in the last episode, Koby struggled with his identity after learning that Marines were not inherently good. Then he resolved his uncertainty off-screen, and yet didn't. Because even though he's a member of the Marines now, he has no idea what being a Marine means to him, which is symbolized through him not quite fitting in his uniform. And looking at the immediate context, he literally just admitted to concealing the truth in order to protect his dream. So Garp remarks that honesty is a core value of the Marines before asking Koby about his allegiance to Luffy. But of course, Koby is still too timid to express his true feelings. And I think that's what this boils down to. He is too timid to embrace his dream, to be the Marine he's always wanted to be. And yet he's equally worried about losing his dream. So he's just giving the answer he thinks he's supposed to say, trying to convince himself as much as Garp that he is a good Marine. And lucky for him, Garp takes him at his word and arbitrarily decides to bring him and Helmeppo along on the hunt for Luffy, which is what enables their story to continue. But since this new direction was not chosen or even wanted by Koby, then he has failed to take control of his own life and failed to be a good Marine due to his regression to timidity. He's having realistic setbacks and struggles, which normally I would praise. But we're now a quarter of the way through his arc and he's just stuck. Despite his resolution at the end of the last episode, he has yet to show any meaningful growth, any real change. In the Syrup Village arc, Garp continues to be the driving force that pushes Koby forward through the plot. Instead of Koby proving his resolve and loyalty through a life-threatening rescue of his fellow Marine, he ties a knot well. So Garp arbitrarily singles him out for mentorship.
This is one thing that the manga and anime does way better than the live-action series. I think they'd have been better served keeping to Garp's original purpose and following the manga more closely. Not only because Garp's reason to be in the East Blue makes more sense, but also clarifying what Garp sees in Koby. In the original story, Garp and his right-hand man, Bogard, first take notice of Koby when he risks both his life and his future in the Marines to protect his friend's life. From there, Koby fighting Morgan alongside Helmeppo is what solidifies his interest. And knowing Garp and the rest of the Marines much later in the story, that kind of recruit would be deeply appealing to Garp. Instead, the live-action series relies on Garp's instinct and his interview with Koby in the previous episode, and now basic sailing skills and game playing. It's a genuinely baffling change.
Yes, live-action Garp's chosen method of mentoring Koby turns out to be simply playing Go, a strategy board game, and telling him to stop being timidly defensive. To help curb Koby's overthinking, Garp pressures him with a timer, and after Koby finally wins, Garp explains the lesson he wants Koby to take to heart. A Marine needs to use swift, decisive action in order to put pirates in their place. Meanwhile, Garp snubs Helmeppo, simply because he's related to Morgan, who didn't care enough about his son to do anything more than give him a rank he didn't earn, which Garp unfairly holds against Helmeppo.
Son, what about me?
Find a rope and practice. I would have hoped your father would have taught you better. Your position as senior cadet has proven unwarranted. Nepotism can only get you so far.
On that note, I want to pull you back to when Morgan praised the potential in Zoro right after dismissing Helmeppo as worthless. Consider how that rejection must have stung. And now, rather than proving himself a more worthy mentor, Garp treats Helmeppo the same as his father had. Despite how in the last episode Garp apparently recognized that Morgan's corrupt leadership was to blame, not his subordinates. Plus, I'll point out that there is evidence Helmeppo is trying to do his job. But instead of recognizing how the boy needs time to climb out of the hole he was stuck in, Garp, really the narrative, just continues to punch down at him. Then, because Garp eventually got good at playing a board game, Garp apparently thinks the boy is ready to lead his first field mission, and sends him to find and capture Luffy on Gecko Island. Yep, you heard that right. Garp decides to toss rank out the window and gives a newly enlisted cadet command over a senior cadet and 2 fully fledged Marines in order to capture a pirate who took down a renowned Marine captain. This is neither a believable scenario nor a necessary one, given how this all plays out with Koby achieving nothing anyway. All it does is beg the question, why does Koby take Helmeppo with him to find Luffy? Yes, Helmeppo is a senior cadet, but his rank is irrelevant. Garp explicitly gave leadership of the mission to Koby, so Koby would have had the choice whether or not to bring Helmeppo. And Koby has no reason yet to view Helmeppo any differently than he did in the first episode. It just doesn't make sense for Koby to bring along someone whom he views as a bad Marine, especially when that Marine has a grudge against Luffy.
I really want to stress how terrible this is. It doesn't just not make sense, it makes anti-sense, to the point it took me right out of the story the first time. Koby hasn't had operational or even basic training, so he'd never be in charge even if rank wasn't an issue. Amy pointed out all the reasons why Koby would never pick Helmeppo for this mission, and 2 regular Marines aren't going to be able to do dick all against Luffy, which Garp would know. We have ideas for alternatives that may have worked instead, but we'll talk about those in our rewrite video. Hint, hint, nudge.
By lucky coincidence, Koby chooses to search through Syrup Village in the middle of the night and overhears Usopp calling for help. Now, on behalf of both of us, I've gotta say, We were so happy to see that the writers did not give Koby moral omniscience here. Instead, he simply allowed for the possibility that Usopp was telling the truth and tried, however timidly, to investigate the situation. But he understood that he needed to have solid evidence before he could really believe Usopp and act on his accusations against Kuro. We likewise appreciate that in characteristic contrast, Helmeppo never believes Usopp, because Morgan claimed to have defeated Kuro years ago, and thus he stays focused on their task of capturing Luffy. Again, showing that he's actually trying to do his job rather than simply skate by on nepotism, for which the narrative punishes him by having Luffy vomit all over him. After recovering, Luffy confirms that Kuro is a threat, but Koby responds that he's under orders to bring Luffy to Garp. Luffy has to remind Koby that he wanted to become a Marine to protect people, and this is a golden opportunity. However, the narrative does not give Koby time to really consider or respond to that challenge. Instead, it has Helmeppo immediately interrupt. He's fed up with Luffy's stalling, so he draws a weapon and threatens him.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal!
Koby tries to stop him, and it seems obvious that this is meant to parallel when Koby stands in front of a loaded weapon to protect a friend in the original. But in live action, Koby only figuratively stands between his friend and danger. I think it's fair to say that Koby believes Helmeppo's threat is sincere, and he seems to have forgotten that Luffy can deflect bullets, otherwise he wouldn't even be worried. But he is noticeably off to the side of where Helmeppo is aiming. And yes, you can argue that it might just be for blocking the shot, but unfortunately it's still character development. Koby is not truly protecting Luffy, despite apparently thinking he needs protection.
Again, we're seeing the damage from that lack of a heroic moment from Koby, resulting from changing Garp's original introduction to the story, which was, in turn, harmed by the change to Morgan's character, removing it as a possibility. As I said many times in the first video of this series, writers always need to think through changes they make and the downstream consequences.
Ultimately, Zoro conveniently arrives and resolves the problem for Koby by knocking out Helmeppo, who then disappears for the rest of the arc. But as Luffy starts to head back to the mansion, Koby suddenly asserts that he must surrender to being captured. Despite that Luffy just confirmed there's a murderous pirate targeting an innocent person. Technically, this moment makes sense. Earlier, Garp coached him to stop being timid, and he won when he took swift action instead, and that's what a good Marine does to deal with pirates. So he's putting what he learned into practice, like one does in a good character arc, right? However, flying in the face of our earlier compliments, the writing is not doing Koby any favors here. He's knowingly contradicting his main goal of protecting people, which in and of itself is not a good look. But more than that, it means he's in a position where he's basically forced to take a step backwards on his path to becoming more assertive. Because if he continues to insist on stopping Luffy, it makes him a bad guy. So as soon as Luffy declares his determination to leave, Koby's backbone crumbles. It has to. When we next see Koby at the end of the episode, he's venting to Garp about failing his first mission due to being indecisive. Although letting Luffy go helped protect people, he's upset. And one can infer that it's because he feels that not capturing a pirate makes him a bad Marine. But lucky, again, for him, Garp shrugs it off, revealing that Koby was supposed to fail, because the real lesson was to always have a backup plan. Honestly, Garp's motivations and goals with Koby are so muddied, but we'll talk about him in another video. For now, he credits Koby with flushing out Luffy as he points out that the Going Merry has just set sail. However, I must point out, A, Koby had nothing to do with when, why, or how Luffy left the island, so this praise is completely unearned. B, the Going Merry has no identity as a pirate vessel yet, and its occupants are all hidden inside the cabin. Not to mention it's setting sail from a town known for its ship industry, which even further lowers the possibility of this being suspicious. But I guess Garp is omniscient now. Yay! This arc put Koby's goals of protecting people and being a Marine directly at odds with each other, but he doesn't truly wrestle with that contradiction. Instead, the forefront narrative struggle is him still being timid and thus indecisive. In the space of one episode, Well, to be specific, in the space of just 3 scenes, Koby switches from not wanting to capture Luffy to insisting on capturing Luffy, to letting him go, to feeling upset about him escaping. And one can certainly argue that this is showing him feeling conflicted on following his own justice versus following what the rules and law dictate, which is a core theme of the Marines in the original story. But he continues to abruptly flip-flop like this right up until the finale, which means that this theme of him struggling with his identity as a Marine, which isn't being given time for any meaningful development, is consistently sabotaging any potential growth he could be showing in regards to conquering his timidity, which is the character aspect getting all the focus, and which is holding him back from his goal of protecting people, which is supposed to be the core motivator for him. The live-action writers have many good aspects that they're doing their best to implement, but they do not have the time to be crafting a complex, realistic character journey. So the result is they're just shooting themselves in the foot, completely crippling their attempts to give Koby a character arc. And it doesn't help that the conclusion of Koby's struggles in this arc is him just discovering that Garp has everything under control. Instead of tying up his experiences in a thematically fulfilling way, that bait and switch of you thought you should be learning this, but actually undercuts everything he just went through. The end of the Syrup Village arc marks the halfway point of the season. By now, we should be seeing some noticeable shift or progression in Koby's character, but we aren't.
From my point of view...
From my point of view, the Jedi are evil!
Wait, what? How did that get here? Shoot, as I was saying. From my point of view, the live-action writer's goal for Koby and Helmeppo in this arc was to cover the things that were lost when the original Diary of Koby Meppo content was removed. The live-action series tries to mimic the rivalry and eventual friendship from the source material, but it unintentionally puts massive roadblocks in the way. Namely, in the original story, Koby and Helmeppo are equal, but the live-action series always has one standing above the other in the first half. Either Helmeppo is a senior cadet, or Koby, despite his rank, being given charge over Helmeppo and full Marines. This doesn't start to change until Barati, and even then, similarly to what Emmy mentioned before, ultimately the character friction between them also has no genuine resolution. When their conflict reaches its peak, a coincidental external force interferes. And then, right off the bat in the next episode, yet another coincidence puts an abrupt end to their rivalry. The manga, however, ended the friction between them through the logical continuation of both what happens in Shelltown and Koby's character growth. I'm going to beat my drum again. When you make changes to a story, whether for a rewrite or an adaptation, you need to carefully observe how to adjust for those changes. The B-plot of the last 3 live-action episodes tried to replace what was covered in one focused anime episode, which could have been fine, but instead the changes fall flat at best, and at worst are intrusive to the A-plot and contradictory. They would have been better served sticking closer to the original plotline, and we'll cover some more options for that in our eventual rewrite video.
Real quick before we continue, if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to leave us a thumbs up or a comment to let us know. And if you're interested in seeing more of these One Piece character breakdowns, be sure to subscribe. We've got a whole series in the works. Now back to it. The Barati A arc opens with the Marines attacking the Straw Hats. We see more evidence that Helmeppo is trying to do his job, but Koby stands in the background doing nothing until the mask starts to come down on him and Helmeppo, whom he pulls out of the way. My guess is this is the live-action substitute for how Koby defended Helmeppo originally. But to be frank, Koby instinctively pulling Helmeppo out of the way of a falling object holds nowhere near the same weight as Koby fully committing to the decision to put his dream and his life on the line in order to rescue Helmeppo from becoming collateral damage. However, to be fair, this does at least earn the payoff of having Helmeppo turn a bit of a corner toward Koby after this, as he would of course be appreciative of Koby protecting him from harm. And bonus, now that Helmeppo is sort of friends with a good guy, a flip gets switched and the narrative finally stops bullying him. Good old protagonist-centered morality. As for Koby, while the repairs on the mast are underway, he enthusiastically reports to Garp that another branch of Marines is nearby whom they could call in to help. And when Garp rejects the suggestion, Koby points out that if they delay, they might lose track of Luffy, which implies that he is eager to continue pursuit. One can infer that this sudden zeal is to make up for his self-proclaimed failure in the last episode. And apparently his renewed determination to be a good Marine has driven out all timidity and all turmoil over his relationship with Luffy, because he is not only taking the initiative to collect and share this information, but going so far as to push back against the Vice Admiral's flat refusal. However, it doesn't last beyond this scene. After Koby eavesdrops on Garp, hearing him sick Mihawk on Luffy, Helmeppo explains to Koby about the warlords. Pirates given free rein in exchange for doing the Marines' dirty work. Koby is appalled, and Helmeppo comments,
"You don't know about how the world works."
Which of course calls back to Koby's own insecurity.
Maybe Alvito was right. I don't know anything about the world.
Thus setting us up for a narrative payoff, for Koby to show how much he's grown since then. So, while Helmeppo again effectively disappears for the rest of the arc, Koby confronts Garp about how there are clearly different rules for different pirates, and reveals that he is, again, second-guessing his choice to become a Marine because of the hypocrisy, essentially putting him right back to where he was in episode 1. But don't worry, Garp basically tells him, yeah, we're unjust, but that's how justice works, you just gotta live with it. And same as in episode 2, Koby's hesitation when he responds implies that he's simply answering with what he thinks he's supposed to say.
Can you live with that?
I think so.
Here's the thing. I believe the narrative wants us to make the connection to episode 2 because it does an explicit callback to the symbolism there by having Garp remark that Koby is now beginning to fit his uniform. But given Koby's uncertain reaction, I suspect the goal here is to show that he's questioning whether fitting in, saying what he's supposed to say, is really the kind of Marine he wants to be. But that means nothing has changed. We're right back to Koby's struggle with his identity as a Marine, sabotaging his attempts to shake off his timidity, his core trait from when he was stuck under Alvida's thumb. Instead of standing his ground on what he claims to believe, he immediately folds, exactly like back then, which means he has not grown. And it gets worse. When Mihawk shows up to talk to Garp, Koby again shamelessly eavesdrops, thus discovering that Luffy is Garp's grandson. Strangely though, while in the last episode Koby brazenly confronted Garp about what he'd overheard, this time around he suddenly seems embarrassed and tries to lie about it. And just as oddly, while Garp in the last episode sharply remarked on Koby's snooping, this time around the Vice Admiral does not seem overly bothered by the fact that a new cadet with a suspicious background keeps listening at his door. Instead, he opens up to Koby about his history with Luffy. Koby helpfully responds to this by claiming that after he spent, half a day with Luffy? He knows how Luffy's mind works. And Luffy will never change because he simply is a pirate. So, completely contrary to his earlier enthusiasm for pursuit, Koby's suggestion now is to allow Luffy to break the law. Let him and his crew by extension, whom Koby does not know, do whatever they want. Obviously, from the very start, Koby has not wanted to pursue Luffy. But he showed eagerness to do so because he apparently believed that to protect people, everyone should be held equally accountable under the law. Yet all Garp had to say is,
"Life isn't fair."
And Koby immediately abandoned his conviction and instead hopped on board with the hypocritical practice of arbitrarily showing favor to some pirates over others.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
What's more, same as Syrup Village, the narrative ends this arc on another bait and switch. Garp seems to be accepting Koby's suggestion to stop chasing Luffy, but then, to Koby's horror, he doubles down instead. At this point, we are 3/4 of the way through the season, and the best I can say is Koby actually showed a bit of assertiveness in this arc. But I don't think I can really give it credit because unfortunately, it's a bit late in the game to be showing such a small step forward. And any sense of meaningful character progression is damaged by the fact that he's mostly just skulking behind doors and constantly waffling on his stated goals and convictions.
It's genuinely a mess because while the live-action writers clearly knew where Koby started and where he's going to end up, they routinely end up more lost than Zoro was trying to get there. And it really is the perfect comparison because they go back and forth trying different methods of exploration, while it all just lacks a clear path of progression. A real person with years to figure themselves out might act like this, but in a narrative, a character's journey should have a clear through line you can trace once you see the entire story.
Now it's time for Arlong Park. Well, more Baratier actually, because the B team is a step behind the Straw Hats. In these episodes, the narrative shares a lot of the focus with Garp, which makes sense given his importance in the final episode, but also means that Koby and Helmeppo have even less time than usual. But when they first arrive at the restaurant, Koby comments on how nice it is, and Helmeppo brags that his father used to eat there all the time, but then admits that Morgan never took him along. The moment is only around 10 seconds long. Helmeppo doesn't even really get to finish talking since the boys are silenced by a look from Bogard. But it's worth noting, and I'll explain why in a minute.
After the boys are sent away so the grown-ups can talk, Helmeppo buys Koby a drink. Although Koby initially protests because they are on duty, when he needs the courage to actually speak his mind, he quickly downs a couple shots before whinging about their continued pursuit of the Straw Hats. We're in the second half of the penultimate episode, and Koby needs to lower his inhibitions with alcohol in order to simply complain about his boss to a peer. At this point, I think it's fair to say that if we'd been getting any proper progression of his character arc, a shot of liquid courage should not be necessary in this context, especially since we've already seen him confront the boss himself while perfectly sober. Shortly after, with very little prompting, Koby reveals that Garp is Luffy's grandfather, which leads to this exchange.
You say what you want about Luffy, but he's the real deal.
It doesn't matter. Not to a man like Garp. You color outside the lines, you get your arm chopped off. What?
Seems like you can relate. Must have been hard growing up with a dad like X and Morgan.
I am nothing like that Straw Hat.
In the second last episode, the live-action narrative is finally acknowledging and showing some sympathy for the fact that Helmeppo had an abusive father. But after it spent the entire first half of the season punishing him for that, these two brief exchanges, hardly amounting to 30 seconds total, do not add the nuance his character deserved. The nuance Oda gave him 30 years ago. But moving on, conveniently, the barkeeper overhears them mention Straw Hat and interjects that he came through recently. So Koby, who does not want to pursue Luffy, eagerly asks where Luffy was heading. It's even implied he pays the man to share what he knows. Then Koby, who does not want to pursue Luffy, immediately runs and tells Garp the information, so they can pursue Luffy. Such consistent characterization, eh? Then we get to the final episode. The B-team has arrived at the Konomi Isles, they're closing in on the Straw Hats, and we should be seeing the results of the boys' character arcs. And when Nezumi blames Luffy for the attack on Cocoa Village, Koby does contradict him.
The pirate in a straw hat. He's the one responsible for this brutal attack. What?
No.
Cadets.
That's not possible.
Are you calling me a liar, boy?
Saying Luffy would never do anything like that.
Nezumi responds by trying to intimidate him. And then, same as we've been seeing, over and over since episode 1, Koby is not given the chance to really test his mettle. We don't get to see whether he would actually assert himself in spite of Nezumi's implied threat, because Garp swoops in and retakes control of the conversation. Character growth is most effectively built and displayed through key moments like these. Moments where a character is challenged or they must make a tough decision, etc. These moments are where a character usually fails early on, and then they begin to take progressive steps of improvement until in the end they succeed against the most difficult challenge. But the live-action narrative has stolen almost every one of these moments away from Koby by excluding him, interrupting him, or having another character save him.
Answer me, you sniveling runt.
He doesn't have to.
Kai is innocent.
You know what? Screw this. I am a Marine captain.
I'm a Vice Admiral.
It has not allowed him to grow. Next time we see the boys is the climax of the season. Garp orders the Marines to arrest the Straw Hats, and Koby counters that Arlong was responsible for the attack on Cocoa Village. Which is a reasonable deduction, but not really relevant, since Garp was clearly set on capturing Luffy long before they even reached this island. So Garp, of course, does not care and reiterates his orders, but Koby refuses. Garp tries to intimidate him with a warning that disobeying orders will result in severe punishment. But still, Koby asserts that he disagrees with the orders, and Helmeppo backs him up. Obviously, just because he's friends with Koby at this point, he really has no personal reason to support Luffy. Now, it seems clear to me that the narrative wants us to view this moment as Koby finally being the Marine he wants to be and trying to protect Luffy, hence Garp praising him for following his code later. But then Koby stands there and does nothing while Garp prompts other cadets to follow his orders instead, and he attacks Luffy. Koby does not take any real action to try to protect Luffy, he just refuses to participate in capturing him. Certainly, from a realistic point of view, just saying no can take a lot of courage, especially in a situation like this. But in context of this story, of the arc we should be seeing based on live-action Koby's stated goals, and based on this being intended as his moment of triumph, this is kind of pitiful. I will grant that for the first time since episode 1, he's finally making an important decision for himself. But wasn't the whole point behind that assertiveness to become someone who protects people?
Now I'm gonna do what I want to do. I'm gonna be a Marine. I want to help people that can't help themselves.
It doesn't help that after he stands his ground against Garp, the narrative immediately shoves Koby off screen so that it can get on with the Luffy versus Garp showdown, giving Koby nothing more, except a quick reaction shot after the narrative pulls another bait and switch in order to resolve that conflict.
Frustratingly, on paper, this kind of ending for Koby makes a lot of sense, with the on-screen mechanics needing only a little tweaking. But as ME has been laying out this whole video, they haven't built up the proper support for it to be a payoff. I reiterate that they got lost to Zoro on their way here.
Next time we see Koby is the following morning when he comes to show Luffy his wanted poster and say goodbye. As most of the conversation is focused on the poster, there's not much to discuss except this final exchange.
Be a good Marine.
Be a good pirate.
In the anime, from the moment he joined the Navy, Koby embodied the ideal Marine. Their mission was to make the world a better and safer place, to preserve order, to act selflessly for justice. And he enthusiastically lived by that standard. He fought for those ideals, even against people with greater power and authority. He was as committed to being what a Marine should be as Luffy was to being what a pirate should be. And that's what's so beautiful about their friendship, that they encourage and support each other despite their opposing dreams.
Jumping in real quick, and this ends up becoming very important late in the story, specifically after the Wano and after the Egghead arcs. Who Koby has become and the person he is makes an extreme difference to moves made by some major characters.
Obviously, the live action tried to copy that, but by having Koby betray the Marine ideals and never truly stand up even for his own ideals, this parallel is completely undermined. The last we see of Koby and Helmeppo in this season is when they come to Garp to accept their punishment for insubordination. But of course, realistic consequences would prevent them from keeping to their predetermined plot. So instead, the narrative, same as at the beginning, uses Garp ex machina to keep the boys on track. Garp also sums up what I deduce was supposed to be the heart of Koby's arc, that struggle of finding his identity as a Marine.
Following orders doesn't make you a good Marine. It's following your code. All men have their own brand of justice. And you both followed yours, so well done.
But as I've detailed, for the whole season, Koby has not really been learning to confidently follow his code, he's just been flip-flopping like a fish out of water. Even in context of what Garp is referring to, Koby did not truly follow his code, because he did nothing to meaningfully try to protect Luffy. All he did was refuse to follow orders. So I think it's fair to say this praise, implying he has proved himself a good Marine, was unearned. But because Garp is impressed by their insubordination, he offers to train them to help them get stronger and learn to fight. Koby eagerly accepts, announcing that he wants to be worthy of holding his own against someone like Luffy, which I assume is referring to his strength, not his good character. But then I don't see why Koby would feel that he needs to be worthy of fighting bad pirates. It doesn't make sense to me. Meanwhile, Helmeppo asserts that he wants to become a great swordsman to rival Zoro. We'll talk about Season 2 in a bit, but that's the end of their Season 1 appearances. To kind of sum things up for Helmeppo, to be frank, in every version of the story after the initial Shellstown arc, Helmeppo is the sidekick of a side character. The anime gives him his own moments to shine, makes him an active and present teammate who trains with and fights alongside Koby. But Koby is really the main focus of their duo, especially after their reunion with Luffy at Water 7. And in live action, Helmeppo mostly disappears into the background, only coming forward to serve as a vehicle for exposition and to push the plot along. One thing I do appreciate about the live action is how it develops Koby as knowing seafaring and Helmeppo as knowing politics, giving each of them complementary strengths to bring to the table. Unfortunately, it's something that just exists rather than being meaningfully utilized by the story, but that's not really a problem, just a disappointment. On another note though, I love how the anime actually recognizes the nuance of Helmeppo's character, and thus does not repeatedly punish him for being raised by a narcissistic and abusive father, whereas the live action makes sure to humiliate him over and over and over. For Koby, in the anime, his character is compelling, his arc impactful. A boy with no power finds his voice and refuses to accept silence ever again. He repeatedly uses his inner strength to protect others, to effect change, and to push through every obstacle in pursuit of his stated goals, namely to be a good marine who captures bad pirates. In live action, the reality is that he's not a character, he's a POV plot device. He shows very little agency. Despite claiming that he's not going to let others make choices for him anymore, he's consistently being pulled or pushed through the plot by more assertive characters. Every goal he claims to have, he shows little to no commitment to. Time and again, he betrays his stated beliefs through his timidity. Throughout the season, he has many opportunities to show growth, but it amounts to nothing.
Koby's his own man.
No, he's not.
What happened? Shh. No talking.
Hold her right there! By order of the Marines, I'm placing you under arrest.
Don't try to stop me. I heard what I heard, sir. And it seems there are different rules for different pirates.
And the ocean is blue. The same set of laws do not apply to everyone. Can you live with that?
I think so.
What are you doing?
Buying you a drink?
You can't, we're on duty.
Oh. Come on.
2 more. I disagree with those orders, sir.
The end of episode 1 is clearly intended to mark a change in his character, and the climax of episode 8 seems intended to show how much he's grown. But over the course of the season, Koby helped no one who needed it, protected no one who needed it, and simply went along with the corrupt marine status quo. His moment of triumph was punctuated by him simply standing and watching as someone powerful abused a good person who wasn't strong enough to withstand them. If you recall, earlier I mentioned how Koby's motivation to become a Marine was on shaky ground because his true goal was to protect people, and one does not need to be a Marine to do so. This disconnect provides the groundwork for what could be a compelling internal struggle over whether or not to be a Marine. But instead, his struggle is about figuring out how to be a good Marine. Hence why he simply shrugs off everything that should dissuade him from sticking it out as a Marine. After all, he can't change his mind because this is an adaptation. Rather than cleverly crafting circumstances to solidify his choice, the live action just never meaningfully challenges him on his decision. And so even though he is repeatedly confronted with marine corruption, he just chooses to live with it. And despite being given no real opportunity to protect people because he's too busy trying to stop a pirate who is helping people, still, Koby stays the course. I would go so far as to argue that despite being narratively shunted to the side, Helmeppo actually has a better character arc than Koby in live action. Helmeppo begins as a cocky, self-centered brat. Then, over the course of the first 2 episodes, he goes from being near the top of the Navy food chain to being a snubbed cadet. But this disruption of the status quo gives him the opportunity to change. And over the Syrup Village arc, we see that he dusts himself off and does his job, trying to prove that he's worthy of his rank. And in the Baratier arc, he shows less arrogance, actually warming up to Koby as a friend, such that when they reach Arlong Park, we see, instead of only thinking about himself, he's willing to risk his standing to support Koby. As far as growth arcs go, it's not much, but at least it has clear and logical progression. Whereas with Koby, over the course of the first 2 episodes, he goes from being a slave to being free to follow his dream of joining the Navy and protecting people. But he doesn't embrace that freedom. He's paralyzed by self-doubt. In the Syrup Village arc, Garp mentors him and gives him a golden opportunity, but Koby fails to uphold either the Navy's objective or his personal goal of protecting people. Then, at the beginning of the Baratier arc, he seems eager to pursue Luffy, but by the end, he argues that they should stop their pursuit. And yet, in the Arlong Park episodes, he ensures that they are able to continue the chase. Of course, in the finale, he refuses to follow Garp's orders to capture Luffy, but that's all he does. Despite being given the freedom and support to change and grow, Koby, from start to finish, remains too timid to truly stand up for himself or his beliefs. He's not wholly stagnant, but there's no clarity or logical progression to his arc, and thus he has no meaningful growth despite him getting far more focused than Helmeppo. Yet the narrative, mainly through Garp, insists he's made significant strides. It's disappointing.
Jumping in to offer a differing perspective. I agree on Helmeppo's arc, but I think I picked up what they were trying to do with Koby's arc, which is different from Emmy's reading. I think they were trying to tell the story of Koby's character as someone, quote, being caught between the real world and his ideals, close quotes. Even more than that, an extremely important theme in One Piece is the recurring question of what justice means to the different people that pursue it. The way I see his arc is the live-action series attempting to do those 2 aspects at once here. However, rather than showing an ever-growing understanding of the way the world works and him firming up his personal code over time, he just spends most of his time waffling in the middle. So rather than exploring his code and having it challenged, he is more or less paralyzed with doubt until finally making a decision at the very end. So in the end, Helmeppo ends up with a better development by default. Overall, Koby and Helmeppo in season 1 of the show are fine, but it's almost frustratingly so, given the heights of the source material and the possibilities we do see for greatness in the live-action series.
Now let's wrap this up with a quick look at Season 2. Koby and Helmeppo, with Garp of course, only show up for a handful of minutes in the 2nd episode. And I actually think this was a really good way of including them. After they were the B-plot characters throughout Season 1, it would be odd for them to just disappear for Season 2. But it also would not make sense for them to have a prominent role again, since their relevance had already been exhausted. So the live-action creators struck a good balance by having them appear, but only to pass the torch to the new B-plot characters. That being said, although their inclusion is sensibly handled, there are a few details of their interactions which, in my opinion, leave something to be desired. When speaking with Tashigi, Koby claims that he became a Marine not to protect people, i.e. before a crime is committed against them, but to get justice for people, i.e. after a crime has been committed against them. The first season was very clear about his goal.
Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to protect people that can't protect themselves. He had to protect that little girl from the Marines, who was supposed to be protecting her. I'm gonna be a Marine. I want to help people that can't help themselves. Marines make the world a better place, one where people can feel safe.
Someone has to stop Kuro. I can't do it by myself.
It's okay. We're here to help.
You said you wanted to help innocent people. Kai is innocent.
I signed an oath to protect people.
Arrest them. You have your orders, Cadet.
I disagree with those orders, sir.
But after all that, suddenly Koby's goal has been retconned to match the original. Honestly, I think it bothers me mostly because that disconnect between his desire to be a Marine and his goal of protecting people is a big, unresolved problem in his Season 1 arc. And now they change it back. Ugh!
I know how you feel, Emmy. There. And funnily enough, I noticed something interesting when I watched the episode. When you look back at Koby's arc in the manga, his focus actually goes from catching the bad guys to wanting to protect people. So live action Koby actually has the opposite viewpoint shift. My hope is that it's more of an expanded way of thinking rather than a replacement.
I was also a bit disappointed with Koby word for word repeating to Toshiki what Garp had told him at the end of season 1. You could argue it's a good callback, but because, as I said before, we did not see Koby actually learn that lesson, then to me this comes off as him simply parroting someone else's motto rather than sharing knowledge he earned.
It's a good sentiment, just the wrong time in Koby's story to use it. The post-timeskip Koby that is a member of SWORD would absolutely say something like this, and it would be completely natural. Which ties into my last thought for this video. The live-action series borrows a lot against this potential future, mainly because I'm guessing that even if they end up with an exceptional run, they don't ever expect it to make it to the end of the story.
Aside from those complaints, there is good consistency. Koby is similarly assertive to how he was at the end of season 1. Helmeppo's friendly razzing also fit with what we had seen, and I liked how each of them initially connected with Toshiki in line with what had previously been established for each of their characters.
Caught spying?
How'd you know?
Eavesdropped from behind a few doors in my day.
Swords are more my weapon of choice.
Relatable.
Overall, I think their season 2 appearance wrapped up their part in the story, for now, quite well. To end, I just want to say thank you to Zexend for all your input, and thank you to the viewers who watched this all the way through. Please join the conversation in the comments and let us know what you think about the live action's take on Koby and Helmeppo. As I said before, this video is part of a series of comparative analyses. Last time we reviewed the East Blue Saga, discussing the plot of each arc, the similarities and differences between the live action and the anime/manga, as well as the pros and cons from each approach. And next time we'll be breaking down Zoro's character to see how well he was adapted. So if you're looking forward to that or other videos in this series, be sure to subscribe. And if you're interested in supporting content like this, you can give via super thanks or check out our Patreon. We often release our videos early there, and we also have a bunch of exclusive content. Thank you as always to our current patrons. We appreciate your support immensely. Stay loud and proud, folks, and I'll see you around.
What Dumbledore says in the that is a book title. You want a unique book title? There's a unique book title. Why can't I stare at the camera? I'm always like, I cannot look at you. No. To be fair, this rushed farewell does maintain a sensible feeling of urgency. Where have we not seen that before? And then he immediately became disillusioned with his dream. So Garp arbitrarily singles him out for mentorship. See, I can say it when I'm not looking at the camera. So Garp arbitrarily singles him out for mentorship. Despite how in the last episode, Garp apparently recognized that Mark's? Who's Mark? Oh, hi, Mark. Given how this all plays out with Koby achieving nothing anyway. Ah, I'm not mad. Real lesson was to always have a backup plan? I'm not mad. Ooh, I'm not mad. My guess is this is the live-action substitute for how Koby offended. I was gonna say offended. My brain was like, panic, words! Get the words out! It's like the one time he protects someone because coincidentally a heavy object was falling from above them. Wow. Goodbye.
I do that thing with my eyebrows all the time, and I'm like, I think it looks stupid, but my eyebrows just move. They just move. I can't do anything about it. And we should be seeing the results of the boys' To be frank, in every... Why? The page just suddenly was like, I want to refresh. And but why? Why? I am exhausted. You are exhausted. We are exhausted. Okay, yeah, and this thought didn't have a home, but I wanted to include it. Koby is unique in that he is the only character, aside from the main characters, who has been around since the first episode and is still present, relevant to the story. Alvida is still a recurring character too, but she's had little, if any, impact on the narrative since her appearance in East Blue. I just thought it was interesting that, like, Koby is not a main character, but he's been there since episode 1, and like so many of the other side characters from the East Blue. I mean, like, in general, from, like, later arcs in Grand Line and everything like that, like, the side characters just kind of disappear. They maybe get a cameo to be like, oh, I'm reading the news about the person I'm connected to. But that's really all they get. But, like, Koby is still, like, an active force within the narrative. And, like, even though he's not a main character, but he's been there since episode 1 and is still, like, I don't know what to call him. Like, I feel like that's kind of like a unique thing, but maybe I just haven't watched enough super long running anime. All right, I'm done. You're done. We're done. Everyone's done. We are so happy. Bye-bye.